Hey everyone, and welcome back to Don't Open That Door podcast. I am the director of the Arrowhead Project, Justin.
I am a religious zealot, Nico.
And I'm Dan.
Oh my God.
My fucking God.
Jesus.
Are you kidding?
You know, we come up with these titles and that's the best you could do.
Yep.
You've disgraced us all.
Yep.
I'm ashamed.
As you could probably tell from our good comrade Dan's pun there, we're going to be covering the 2007 adaptation of the Stephen King novella, The Mist. So this was directed by Frank Darabont, starring Thomas Jane as David Drayton. We've got Marcia Gay Harden as Mr. Scarmody, Andre Brower as Brent Norton, and we've got Toby Jones as Ollie. So, you know, we kind of opened this movie here with a guy, David Drayton. He's an artist and he's living, you know, a kind of nice life in Maine with his wife and his kid, Billy. One night, a big storm hits and a tree goes through the window and ruins one of his paintings and everything else. Now, ironically, the painting itself is a shout out to another Stephen King work, The Dark Tower.
There's also The Thing in there.
Yeah.
Correct. There is. And this movie is actually chock full of references here and there. There's only one other one I can think of right now, though, off the top. So
Definitely chock full then.
hey, you know what? I didn't say it was chock full for me. Think about that.
What?
So the next morning, they examined the damage that's been caused by the storm. You know, their boathouse is destroyed, and David ends up going into town with his neighbor, Norton, whose car was wrecked, as well as his son. So, you know, on the way to the store, they notice some military personnel heading back in the direction that they're driving away from, right? So they're heading into town. The military personnel are heading out of town towards the mountains. Now, earlier that morning, David had seen some mist, dramatic pause, over like the lake or water, wherever they were living at. So, you know, he doesn't pay too much mind, like, oh man, where are those army guys going? Don't really say too much. And then they go to the grocery store, and that's where this movie really takes off. And the bulk of this movie does take place in that grocery store. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell us what happens when they're actually in that store?
Yeah, so they get to the grocery store, they're doing their normal shopping, and then this guy who's like kind of bloodied up and stuff kind of runs into the grocery store and he's like, oh, there's monsters, there's something in the mist, and he yells at them to close the doors and barricade everything. So they do, and then all of a sudden like this heavy mist just takes over everything outside and you can't see past like a foot, you can't see anything. They don't really know what's going on. And basically, shit just starts getting real from there.
And how real is yet to be determined because, you know, so the people in the store don't actually believe there are monsters in the mist, do they, Nico?
No, they're just like, hey, what the fuck's going on here? It's just part of the water cycle. They don't actually mention the water cycle. They're not hydrologists, but they are definitely skeptical. You know, this is small town Maine. It's not exactly like this is a university town or, you know, a group of scholars. It's just everyday people. And they see some guy who's frenzied and covered in blood and screaming, start running in the store. And, you know, I'll be honest, I would be a little, you know, suspicious as well. I'd probably be like, what the fuck's going on here? But, their
they do
doubts,
get some more evidence.
Yes, they sure do. They do get some more evidence in the manner of Norm getting tentacled and taken out from under would you say like a garage door?
Yeah, it's like a loading dock at the back of the grocery store. And they try and, you know, the people there are still insisting that there's no monsters in the mist. So, you know, Norm volunteers to go outside and essentially unclog a vent that's currently being clogged. And, well, it doesn't go too well for him because he gets assaulted by some kind of land-dwelling octopus demon eldritch abomination. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
accurate.
No, that's definitely like on par with what I was thinking, yeah.
So then it's pretty funny, even though, a group of maybe 4 to 5 people witness this happen, they go back into the store, tell the people, hey, there's monsters out there, fam. The people still don't believe that.
Yeah, they're like, nah.
Yeah, even Norton plays the role of the skeptic, and he's like, this is a joke, you guys just don't like me. And he actually, you know, wants to basically strike out on his own with his small little group of people who think like him, and they go out into the mist, and they are all murdered, death, killed. So
Murdered and killed.
more monsters start to appear, though. We see some kind of cool little, I use the term eldritch, but they're like eldritch cicadas that come out. We get, you know, some kind of weird spiders, a scorpion beast, a bird. Like, it's some really cool stuff. And we also have a little monster inside the grocery store. She goes by the name of Mrs. Carmody. Now, she starts preaching, she's known as like a religious nut or like a fanatic in the town. No one really pays her any mind. But as things start going downhill, the bodies start piling up, people start fraying and losing their nerves. She starts gaining more and more and more traction in the group. She becomes almost they describe her as the Jim Jones-esque figure. She's basically like the cult leader. And the movie culminates now where David and his small, ever dwindling group of friends basically are like, we have to get out. Either the monsters are going to kill us or these people are. So they do finally get out. And their whole plan is just, you know what? We got to drive past the mist. We have to get out of the mist. So they make a bold move. And, I will say one of my favorite characters, Ollie, he was the hotshot hero of the group, really. And he gets taken out by, I don't know, what would you call it? A scorpion beast from hell?
Some giant.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, so Ollie just gets took out of the game and the rest of them hop in. That's going to be, David, Billy, one of the women in the store who was helping take care of Billy. Her name escapes me at the moment. Then we also have the old, and I'm going to use the term school marm because her name was Irene, I believe. But yeah, that's pretty much what she was. And we've also got, oh man, the other guy, I completely forget his name, one other survivor. They all get in, so there's 5 of them total, and they drive off.
Wasn't that older guy the guy who came running in at the very beginning?
Yes, he made it all the way through.
So they run out of gas and they're just sitting there and they're trying to it's a super powerful scene, by the way. They're kind of trying to figure out what to do. And for the most part, it's all silent. And David pulls out the gun that they have and he takes out the bullet and he counts out 4 bullets. But there's 5 people in the car. And, they just kind of like look at each other and with recognition dawning on their faces that they're going to die here. And they'd rather be taken out by, quickly and painlessly rather than with these monsters. So, the camera pans out and you see lights flash and you hear the gun shoot as David shoots and kills the other 4 people in the car, including his son. And of course he's just wrecked and he's, screaming and yeah, it was a powerful scene.
It was really messed up, but what compounds that and makes it even worse. And now keep in mind, this is an ending that the director, Frank Darabont, he fought for this. So I'm talking maybe minutes, if that, after, David just, it's not quite murder. It's he
mercy
basically
killing.
Basically. Like everyone agreed that was going to be the best way to go, not to die by the monsters. So, David gets out and he's like screaming to the monsters, come get me, because he can't live with what he's done. And the only comfort is that he's not going to be long for the world. Well, he actually is, because right then it shows the mist dissipating and the army rolls through. And it looks like they have, closed off whatever portal, because that's really what was causing the mist. It was theorized that the Arrowhead Project was creating a portal between our world and another one, and that's how the mist and all these demons and stuff, monsters, were getting in. It looks like the army's finally managed to close it off because they're coming and they're just killing out all the demons and burning everything down. And it's like, oh man, if they had just waited, like they fought through all that in the movie, and then right at the very end, they were 5 minutes away from rescue. Mm-hmm. And to rub salt in the wounds, there's actually a woman who's with the army. She was in the grocery store at the very beginning. She chose to leave.
She was the first one to leave.
Yeah, and everyone thought she had died. But in actuality, she did make it out. So that is how that movie ended. I guess to kind of lead our discussion, how'd you guys feel about that ending? I mean, that ending is something that like, I mean, this is my second time watching this movie, and even then, I knew what to expect, and it still messed me up.
I mean, it's a tough ending, but I feel like it's a very good ending.
Good or satisfying, or maybe not even satisfying, but just like I don't know. Fuck.
Well written ending. I guess. I don't want to say good because it's sad and everything.
Satisfying. They all died.
But I mean, it was well written. I almost feel like it was like the perfect ending for something like that.
Do you think it would have come off as hokey if they kept with the original ending of the novella? And Justin, you want to explain what that ending is?
Yeah, it's my understanding that the novella ends with it's a very similar ending, but they don't get to that point where the car runs out of gas. They basically hear over their car radio that they hear one word, they hear Hartford. And based on the hope that Hartford is okay, they just drive away. They head in that direction. And that's how it ends. So the novella is a more open-ended, whereas this one is like humanity did it. We closed the portal, and now the army's just coming through and sweeping up the monsters. So it also raises the question that, the people, the cultists, essentially, they probably lived.
Ain't that some shit? They probably did.
Possibly, yeah.
Because they only had to stick out like what? Like it was implied that because he just drove. And I know he had like one of those SUVs. So I figure he's maybe got like what, a couple hours of gas?
Something like that. Yeah, he doesn't get very far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So literally, it was probably later that day the army got to the cultists and saved them all.
So then here's my question for you guys. Do you think that was just shock value, or that actually had some narrative integrity to it?
What, the ending?
The ending. Yeah, the ending. Do you think that it was like penned in there by, Frank Darabont, the director, as just like kind of a gotcha, or was there like a greater purpose behind it? Because I still don't quite know how to feel.
I feel like there was a greater purpose personally.
Yeah.
I think first off, it's in keeping with the cosmic horror tradition that the main character like goes insane.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I think that's the ending drove him insane. And then also, so we see throughout the movie, and we'll talk more on this later, but we see kind of the dichotomy of being overly logical or being overly just not driven by any kind of fact or reason. And
Apathetic, maybe?
well, not quite. I'm talking about the cultists. Like they're driven on the ravings of a self-styled fanatic. And so, we're presented both of those two options and they're seen as the kind of quote, quote, wrong option. But in reality, David is also in the wrong. Like his solution doesn't work either.
I don't know if I would say he's in the wrong, though. Just like coincidentally, he was like not lucky.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, but at the same time, like his thoughts, his plan of action, they in the end don't work.
That's true. That's true enough.
So I do think there was a point to that. But before we get too deep into some of the critical analysis, let's start with the basics. So, Dan, the audio. Now, I know there wasn't a ton of, songs in this movie. The ending vocalization was very strong.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But what are your thoughts on that and just the rest of the audio?
I mean, I thought it was great. Everything was well recorded. Sound effects were great. Like you said, that actual, music while they're driving away through the mist and everything was very haunting and ambient and very cool, I thought. And this is gonna sound weird, but it really kind of like made you think, I guess. I don't quite know how to say that properly, but I don't know. It felt like I was traversing space like that. I don't know. I thought it matched perfectly. Yeah, I mean, the audio I thought was awesome.
All right, and Nico, let me ask you this now. In terms of the visual effects, now I'm not strictly speaking about the monster designs here. We'll talk about that a little bit down the road. But just in terms of the overall CGI and effects, because these monsters were CGI monsters for the most part. There were some practical effects.
Yeah.
How did you feel about them? And did they hold up?
So I think they do for the most part. There is some, like inconsistencies with like lighting and how like there are some times where the tentacles on the monster are much brighter than they should be in the shots. But that's, I think, maybe a little too nitpicky for the time. The thing that I noticed more than anything, and I think this was probably just a directorial choice to make it seem more gritty and sort of like grounded in humble reality. Did you guys notice the film grain going on in at least the first half of the film?
I didn't know. Actually.
I did not.
Oh, well, there was a little bit of film grain, at least at the very beginning. I might have just gotten used to it, but I definitely noticed that when things were, still relatively normal, there was that just sort of more gritty quality to it. And I think that's interesting, but it does it does give it a certain kind of vibe. And I wouldn't say that this necessarily dates the film. It looks a lot better than other films that were released that year. I can say that much. So in general, yeah, I would say it holds up. And particularly given the set design being mostly mist, like with the outside anyway, you don't ever really see a clear picture, like crystalline clear picture of the monsters. So that worked in its advantage.
Well, not
Agreed.
the big ones. I mean, you see plenty of the smaller ones. Those are all over the
I'm
place.
saying like you don't have a photorealistic image of them. You can see like silhouettes and shit.
The big ones are the silhouettes.
But I mean, there's plenty of small ones inside that they fight for.
Well, yeah,
I
I should have clarified the ones that are outside of the grocery store.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because they do come into direct contact with those. You are right.
So here's a quick question, taking kind of a small detour here. So this is obviously based on a Stephen King book. And we all know, but what are some classic Stephen King isms, I should say, that this movie has? I'm going to lead with the most obvious one. It's a small little happy town in Maine that gets totally fucked.
Yeah.
That's the classico right there. You got any others?
Yeah, I mean, he sure loves Maine as well as just like taking quaint little places and just ruining them to all hell. Another thing that I noticed that popped up was particularly in the characterization of Mrs. Carmody, Marcia Gay Harden's character. She's the, like the cult leader and the more like religious zealot type figure. And I've noticed that in a lot of Stephen King novels and stories, it might not necessarily have a religious zealot, but it will have some sort of other figure who is more fanatic and kind of tries to stoke the fires of fear within people and get them to be more terrified. And so in that, she very much holds up this sort of purpose of having the narrative position that she's in, where she literally functions to make the story scarier, but also as kind of an antagonist to the more like rational minded people, like you were saying, where it presents sort of like a dichotomy where you have the people who are thinking with their feelings and are swayed by the fervor of Mrs. Carmody, and then there's the people who have the sort of like the cold sterility and logic on their side, and it turns out that neither one is really the best way to go about it. And now I'm not saying that Stephen King is doing any kind of like centrism, both sides are correct here. I think he's just really creating a dense, horrific, and ultimately unwinnable atmosphere. And in terms of how he builds that and limits the setting in particular to the grocery store, I think this is textbook Stephen King, but like in the best way. I love Stephen King.
I think it was novella Stephen King, but I agree with you. So
okay.
Now, you talked about Mrs. Carmody and her role as a cult leader. So I did want to ask you real quick, Dan. So over the course of 2 days, one character even mentions it. At the start, Mrs. Carmody is, preaching her religious stuff, and she's all, fire and brimstone. And the people literally even like throw like peas at her, a can of peas.
A can, not fucking individual peas.
Yeah, and then like one guy, he threatens to like go over there and give her a swift kick up the ass, and like one woman actually walks over and smacks her. And within 2 days, she literally has converted almost everyone to her little cult, and they are willing to kill for her. They are willing to do whatever she says. Within 2 days. Now, Dan, let me ask you, because I know you have deep, deep, deep ties to people. Do you think people would do that?
I do, actually, with my knowledge and deep ties to people.
Of people, yes.
I kind of do, for a couple of reasons. One, I think that predominantly people are scared. So they're going to try to find something to connect with in some sort of answer. And well, they're scared and they don't understand what's happening. These monsters and everything are sort of beyond our comprehension. Monsters from a different dimension or something like that. That's sort of beyond our realistic comprehension. So when presented with the idea that we've all seen before, we've all heard before, it's even if we don't believe it, it's familiar to us that, God is going to punish us for this and coming to kill us, and we must, sacrifice people. Like, those are themes that we've seen before. I think people would latch on to that, be driven to do crazy shit, killing people to save themselves and to stop what's happening. So I do think that's kind of believable.
I'm going to turn now. Dr. Madden, do you concur?
Fuck no. Like, no offense, Dan.
Oh,
I
he
think
gets a
that,
no offense. Okay.
None taken.
Well, yeah, because I was talking to him,
my
not
God.
you. You get full offense,
my God.
motherfucker. Yeah, you bet you weren't expecting that fucking
I
fire.
was expecting mist, but keep going.
Ho-ho! No. Now, granted, this is one of the works of Kings that I haven't read. Do you know, Justin, if it takes place over the same amount of time in the novella?
I am not positivo.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if it takes place over like weeks, then I could see people defecting. But over the course of like 2 or 3 days, nah. Like, there was even a point in time in the movie where Ollie was like, guys, I could just like fucking duct tape her up and we could be rid of this problem. And I was like, yes, do that. My God. So I don't think it was like, people are definitely prone to being shepherded, particularly in times of fear, but I don't think that would have happened. I think that is probably the most unrealistic thing to go on. Because, like, think about it like this. Are people nice to the Westboro Baptist Church?
No.
QED, my guy.
Well, actually, I disagree, and I'll explain why. There was a quote from one of the characters in the movie talking about how we are civilized so long as the machines are working, so long as you can still call 911. But when all that stuff starts going out the window, you'd be surprised how primitive people can get. So I think in your
something Thomas Paine.
Well, no, but I think in your example, you are talking about people who still have the comforts and the security of, modern day. So yeah, of course, people are going to be sane and rational thinking, and they're not going to really put up with that bullshit. However, and it's kind of something that I learned for myself. So for example, in some places, especially way back in the day when electricity wasn't everywhere, like, most people in our generation have no idea what it's like to be in true darkness. I'm talking like there is no electricity in your fucking house. Like, you better light a candle or get to stepping. Most people have no idea what it's like to fumble in the true darkness like that. Most people do not know. And so that's nowadays. And so, like, that's what I'm trying to say, though, is like, when you're in that darkness, all your rational thoughts, they go out the window. And I do honestly believe, I agree with Dan. I think that when you're put in a really scary situation and someone is offering you, like a hand and saying, hey, my way is the right way. Like, this is the way to go about it. I feel like a lot of people would take her advice, particularly because it's religious and they're seeing scary things, and people have always turned to religion to get over scary things.
See, I would agree with you if she was more charismatic and ultimately kind and inviting, but she wasn't. She was off-putting and violent.
Right, but keep in mind, at the beginning when you mentioned that, like, I think it was Ollie was like, I'll duct tape her up right now or whatever, that was before people started getting murdered by these monsters. So after that, monsters, they literally physically saw with their own 2 eyes dozens of these like flying monsters. Some of them broke into the place. Somebody got burned alive. Somebody was bitten and killed. Some guy got his like literally like ripped in half. All this stuff was happening. And then this one religious lady is like, see, I told you this was going to happen. And then she said, we will not get attacked tonight. And it didn't happen. And a monster landed on her and she never got attacked when monsters were attacking everybody else. So from the point where she said, where somebody was like, I will duct tape you up, nothing had really, truly, seriously happened. And now all of a sudden, all this shit happened. I would like to say I wouldn't believe her, but if I was in that situation, I'd be like, damn. I mean, she called it. She said we weren't going to get attacked tonight. How would she know that? And like all these things, I'd be like, I might be inclined to believe her. Again, I don't want to. I'd like to sit here and say I wouldn't, but in reality, I mean, shit.
Interesting.
That's fair.
All right, fair for all
That's
around.
fair.
For all around. So, real quick, Dan mentioned it, and I do think it's kind of worth stating. Well, actually, Dan didn't mention it. I thought it. So, do you think?
Wow.
Great idea, Justin.
Do you think people were too slow to accept what was going on? So, the mist rolls in. A guy runs in saying, "There's fucking monsters, mate." Do you think that people were too slow to accept it? Or do you think Peter acted with the skepticism that most people would have?
I think it went about as well as it could have, all things considered.
Yeah, I agree. I think that pretty much everyone reacted the way I would have believed, except for maybe what was his name?
You know, Norman?
Andre Braugher's character.
Yeah, that guy though, because I think he maybe have overreacted because of his thought that they were trying to screw him over. But even then, I would still have expected him to not believe it in the first place. Because I mean, in reality, it's a pretty unbelievable thing. So
Yeah, and I think it's actually kind of wild as well because the dude literally had blood and a tentacle in the loading dock for anyone to see who wanted to see.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things, and I was like, man, personally, well, I'll save that for a little bit down the road, but I do agree with you guys. I think largely most people are unwilling to believe that their security is under threat until it's too late. So
I can't remember the name of the effect, but there have been a bunch of studies about this, particularly given I promise I'm not going to go on a tangent here, particularly given the hectic political climate that we find ourselves in 2020. There have been a bunch of studies going out for, like, no matter what side of the vast political spectrum that you're on, people tend to, when presented with actual empirical evidence that betrays their worldview, they tend to double down harder into that worldview and reject the evidence. So I absolutely believe that this went about as well as it could have in terms of the people's reactions to it.
I believe it's motivated reasoning.
Maybe? That sounds familiar. Anyway, you get the idea.
Yes, sir. So let's go ahead and talk real quick about our favorite things in this movie. And one thing that I personally think was awesome is the gore. I think it was because it wasn't necessarily all over the place, but literally we see a guy's bifurcated torso. Just
good word there.
Being dragged down the street. We see, I believe he was an MP, right, Dan? Who was in the drugstore.
yes, yeah,
And he's like, they don't know about these spiders. And then he's like, it was all our fault. And then you see that he's got all these spider eggs attached to him. And then the spiders show up and then the spiders literally burst out from his body. I was like, oh, snap, son. That was, I don't know. That was pretty hot.
Very reminiscent of The Thing, if I may be so bold.
In what way?
So one, because I'll admit there's a little bit of basis in just the intro shot because there's a poster for The Thing, but you remember the scene where I forget his name, but the first guy to get corrupted and he it kind of explodes out from inside of him with more of the corruption. It was kind of similar to that. And I just thought that was super cool. That as well as just the aesthetics of where they are. So at that point in the movie, the main squad, David Drayton and his crew, decided that they needed to go to a nearby pharmacy to get some painkillers as well as some antibiotics for one of the people who got attacked by the aliens. And they go into the pharmacy and it is covered in, I couldn't say cobwebs because they're acidic webbing, and they see all these people that are cocooned up and they've got these boils on them, and they start talking about it's all my fault, I'm so sorry they're doing this to me. And it is a terrifying scene. It was probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
My favorite thing about the movie isn't exactly a scene, but it's the way that the movie builds tension throughout.
Oh, yes.
And we've kind of talked about building tension and everything in previous episodes. And I think this movie did it very well. And some movies don't show the monsters, don't show the kills, that kind of stuff. Some movies do it too much and don't leave enough to the imagination. But I feel like this one was the perfect blend because first you see the guy running in from the mist saying there's monsters, something took this person or whatever. So you're like, oh, what's out there? And then the next time they interact with the mist or whatever, you see a tentacle. Like you as the viewer see that there really is something out there and it kills somebody and it can be pretty violent there. And then the next few times the kills are all off screen. Somebody walks out into the mist and you hear them scream or like, Justin mentioned the guy who gets, the body ripped in half. You see the body, but you don't see the body getting ripped in half. We don't see that part.
Yeah.
And other times you do see people get killed by the creatures. And I think it's a really good blend of seeing the violence and seeing the creatures and everything, but then also still leaving some to the imagination so you don't fully know what the creatures are and what they look like and everything until near the end where you see most of them. But again, like Nico mentioned, even though those are just silhouettes sometimes. So I think it does a really, really good job of baiting you in, leaving just enough to the imagination, but also giving you just enough to not get bored or sterile, too sterile, I guess, with, leaving too much to the imagination.
I would have to say my absolute favorite sequence was after they get in their car and the music starts playing. That was so cool. It was just them in the mist. And it's like, there's so much silence, and not musically, but just between the characters and the dialogue. And it speaks volumes because it really is like you're surrounded. You can't get out. You're trying. And I don't know. The ending to me, now that I think more about it, is also kind of a betrayal of their own human spirit.
How do you mean?
So I believe that David is meant to represent the best values of maybe not even necessarily like an American, but like just a person, right? Like he's a family.
Just an everyman?
He's a family man, right? He loves his wife. He loves his kid. He's got a neighbor that he doesn't like, but he still tries to not be an asshole. When trouble happens, David is always the person helping someone. Always. David never gives up. David always is pushing people. And like he never stops trying. At the very end of the movie, he's finally beaten. He's finally defeated. He stopped trying, and it led to his downfall. Because if he had just kept trying, kept doing it, kept pushing, okay, we'll have to walk. Like he was more afraid of the unknown than of what the reality was. The first woman who left the store, she was more afraid of leaving her kids alone than she was of whatever was in the mist. And she lived. The fog, the mist, not the fog. And she lived. And then we also have, some of the other characters who, I don't know. I just felt like they weren't necessarily showing the best, because I feel like the cultists were meant to show the worst in humans. Paranoia, suspicion, like a mob mentality. I feel like those are bad things. So yeah, that's my take on it. And that's why I really enjoyed that scene. But what were you saying, Nico?
So I would get all of my English teacher credentials ripped away from me if I didn't ask this for sake of discussion. What do you guys think the mist represents?
I wrote that down as well. So I'd like to.
You did?
I'd like to join that union, but no. Dan, what do you think the mist represents? Let me ask you that since I thought of it.
I don't know. I don't really have any thoughts. I would have failed that English assignment.
Oh my God.
God damn it, Dan, you failed. Literally, yes.
Yeah.
So you actually kind of mentioned it earlier. This is definitely, I would argue, a piece of cosmic horror. And we've talked about that in a couple different episodes of the pod. But basically, the gist of it is that cosmic horror has to do with a truly unknowable entity or presence that drives you past the edge of reason. And it's something that the closer you get to acknowledging and confronting the reality that you are in, the worse your situation gets, which we see in David Drayton's narrative and character development, how he ends the movie literally insane after he mercy kills his friends and family. But the way that I take it is that the mist represents, and this is a very, very base level analysis. I really think that, simply put, the mist just represents the fear of the unknown and fear of the other.
I don't know that it just the unknown, because the mist isn't totally unknown. You know, there's bad shit there that's killing you. So
Well,
I mean, it's
yeah.
like, I mean, it's not. I mean, it's unknown in the sense that you don't really know exactly what's out there, but you know it's bad, and you know you're going to fail
Well,
with
yes.
like 99, almost 100% certainty. So I don't really feel like it's the fear of the unknown.
What I mean to say is it takes away the knowledge, the certainty.
I mean, it does, but I just feel like you're so close to certain death that it's not really unknown. Because I mean, like, I feel like if we're talking about something being unknown, you know, starting a new job or jumping into a new career or stuff, yes, there's a lot of ways, you know, potential ways you could fail, but there's also a lot of ways that you could succeed. In this movie with the mist, there's very, 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 very few ways you could succeed.
That's true.
10 bajillion ways you could die. And, you know, I think if it wasn't almost assured death in the mist, I think a lot more people would have just gone out and tried.
That's fair.
So I do think that there were, and I'm going to cop an easy route here. I think it was a test. And by that, I mean, it was a test of togetherness, a test of ingenuity, and a test to see if people could overcome and get together and sacrifice for the common good.
I can see that too, yeah.
Because, you know, at the start of the movie, we see the army guys running towards the mist, essentially. So they are trying to save people. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what they're trying to do. Granted, it was their fault, right? Like, they unleashed the mist onto the world. But the army also, at the end of the movie, saves everyone. So I feel like in that circumstance, they're almost representative of not necessarily an uncaring deity necessarily, but they are almost like chaos. Like, they didn't know what they were messing with. Boom, it happened. And then everyone else, the normal people, had to deal with it for as long as they could. And like I said before, everyone lost their way.
Literally.
What you do in the mist. So that's what I think. But it's not just what I think. It's what you guys think too. Put yourself in the shoes of David, maybe. Or let's say three of us are, oh man, Justin, we're out of limes. Nico wants some popcorn. Dan, Dan's trying to get some Coca-Cola. Like, let's go ahead and go to the grocery store. Let's hit the H Mart. Oh snap. It's the mist. What would we do in that situation? What would you do in that situation?
Are we in the shop with them, or is this like we're in our homes now?
Oh, we're in the grocery store.
Oh, we're in the grocery store? Bet. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I also want to point out that I feel like the grocery store is the right place to be.
Yup.
You got all the food, just post up. Y'all worry about this when the bunch crunch is out. No.
Dude, I don't fucking know what I would do. I mean, there's the things that I would like to say that I would do and like to think I would like to do. But in reality, man, I don't fucking know. I feel like I'd just be one of those like random people, one of the extras in the movie who just like does whatever the fuck they do. Like, I wouldn't be like a David. I wouldn't be a hero in that sense. I wouldn't be, as vocal output as what's her name, the religious zealot. I feel like I would be there. I don't know. And for the record, most of the movie, I knew this question was coming, and I was like, what would I do? And I still can't really come up with like a good answer.
That's okay, because I have one. I duct tape Mrs. Carmody's fucking mouth shut.
Before we get started on that, let me say this.
Oh, okay.
Dan, it is often those who do not choose to be a hero.
Oh my God.
That the role is thrust upon.
And with great power comes great responsibility, Uncle Ben.
Sometimes. I mostly focus on my rice. But the thing is this. Dan, I think actually knowing you, and the audience doesn't know you, but I know Dan. Dan is a gallant knight. And I do think that while he would not seek the responsibility, it will be thrust upon him. And I think you would succeed, Dan. I think you are the David of the group. Nico, who would you betray and why?
Yeah, we've established this already.
You. I don't know why, but it'd be you.
That checks out.
I think to make matters worse, you'd probably like go to the pharmacy to get me the medicine, but you get me something I'm allergic to and kill me and be like, oh, snap. It's my bad.
Yeah,
dog.
I was going to say like, yo, that's my bad.
I owe you one on that. And just like keep it moving.
I would just be like,
no.
It would just be negligent homicide on my hands at that point, and I fully accept that. I'm sorry.
I'm honestly the type that would, I feel like I would strike out into the mist to try to get away.
You 100%
Much
would.
earlier.
That's why I said you
Yeah,
would
I think
absolutely
you
go
would,
with
yeah.
Sinead O'Connor.
Mm-hmm.
The first character who goes, I jokingly refer to as Sinead O'Connor because she looks like her, for the record.
But yeah, so I mean, I just think I'm not the kind of person who, this is just, and this gives you a little bit of insight, listeners. I'm that guy who could be completely innocent and then something happens and everyone's like, it was you. It was him. It had to be that dude.
Because 50% of the time it is you, and the other 50% of the time it isn't.
Fucking coin flip. Okay.
I've been told I kind of sometimes look guilty. So
It's because 50% of the time you are guilty.
so
We're
Mom,
great
Dan over
friends.
So yeah, but I don't know. Like I feel like I wouldn't want to put up, I don't trust myself in, especially if I'm an outsider, even if I'm an insider. I mean, I wouldn't trust myself in a crowd of people to like leave myself to their whims. Friends is different. Like I could be around friends, yeah, but not a crowd. I'd be like, I gotta go.
Yeah, I'd agree. You'd be one of the first people out. You'd grab a machete and just fucking dip.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny when I saw the like eldritch cicadas, I made a note like, I have fought these things before in Trinidad.
Those things are going back, I heard, to Virginia in a couple months or something, right?
We don't talk about that, Dan.
They are,
We
yeah.
don't talk about that.
They are. And another thing we don't talk about, but now we're going to talk about, is the critic review. So this movie, first off, give me your best guess, gentlemen. What do you think the critical rating is on Rotten Tomatoes?
Awesome.
I'm going to say a high 70s, low 80s.
I'm going to say a high
Dan?
80s, low 90s maybe.
So you've actually got a low 70s.
Oh, really?
72%.
Wow.
Where do you think the audience put this at?
Probably,
I'm going to stick with my high 80s.
I'm going to guess that they fucking hated the ending and say low 70s.
It's actually 65%. So,
Oh,
Man,
well, damn.
swing and a miss. Both accounts.
so I'm going to ask you guys, first off, where would you put this? Just yourselves. Rotten Tomatoes is an aggregator, TM, I know. So on a scale from 1 to 100, where would you guys put this? I feel like Dan knows. So let's go ahead and say
I'm
it,
going to
Dan.
put it at an answer that I feel like I've said too many times so far on this podcast, but I'm going to put it at like a 75 to 80, somewhere around there.
Okay, so you'd put it up. Okay, that's fair.
See, I would put it
Nico?
higher than that. I would put it at like, again, 85. I think that the only real problem I have with this movie is that I love Andre Braugher as an actor, and I think that he was underutilized. But for the rest of it,
Agreed.
I really did, love what we were experiencing. It was kind of, an experience of, we were seeing how people would, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but just sort of like decline in the face of adversity. And that was interesting to see from kind of just like a existential philosophical perspective, but B, like, y'all know I love cosmic horror. This is totally my shit.
I will say this. I would stick it at a roundabouts of 75, not too much higher than the critics. And my rationale for that is, first off, runtime. I think it was a little bit bloated. Coming in at a little over 2 hours, I don't think this movie needed to be quite that long. Also, I'm not going to take any points off for the CG because this was 2007.
Right.
So that's passable. That's acceptable. But where I will take points off is, first off, it didn't. I thought that particularly the scenes where people doubted and then started to slowly, I would have liked the kind of conversion to the crazy woman to maybe happen more gradually.
Agreed.
I do think that it was a almost night and day difference. Once they went to the pharmacy and came back, the people in the store hadn't witnessed anything new. And yet seeing like one dude come back ranting and raving was enough to break them all. And by the, that following night, she had a whole congregation.
Yeah.
So I do think that, and because it was such a major plot point, I do kind of take a little bit of issue with that. But the positives are, I think, the visuals I liked for the most part. I liked the mist as a backdrop, as a scary element. I thought the tension, like you said, Dan, was well built. So yeah, I think 75 is exactly where I'd put it. Definitely something that, well, let me ask you guys, does this movie get a recommendation? Would you recommend this to somebody?
Yes.
I would as well. Does this get the golden seal of approval?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so either. So there you go. And I mean, do you guys have any last thoughts to get off your chest?
No.
Nah. Great movie.
Indeed. Well, that's been it from us here at Don't Open That Door. If you like what you hear, please go ahead and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That's at DOTD Horror. You can also find us on Facebook at Don't Open That Door. Yeah, that's it from Nico, Dan, and Jess. Everyone, please, if you do see some mist, be careful. Be careful anyways, given today's, scenarios. Everyone, please stay safe. Have a great night. And please, ladies and gents, don't open that door. Goodbye.